Hey, I'm Dean and this is Legacy Voyage. In Season 1, I'm documenting my journey to earning my first 100K net worth as a full-time college student. Join me as I share some of the lessons I learned along the way. I don't have the microphone today, so I wasn't able to go for a walk around the Lakeville. So right now I'm just recording this video on my Mac, on my computer. So if you want to see the full video, then you can check out the description. I think it should have the Notion page, which will have the full video. But let me dive into it. There was a story I heard. It was about this kid, high school kid. He's going through school and he's kind of just like slacking off. He's a slacker, and so trying to get through school, not really going to classes, not really studying for tests, not really doing any of those things. And so it gets back into this feedback loop that I keep bringing up in a lot of my episodes, where it's this feedback loop where if I believe I'm going to do bad on a test, and because of that, I don't study for the test, and because of that, I do bad on the test, and then it goes over and over and over again. And it's especially all of these things, they reinforce this identity that I have in my mind, where I look at myself and I say, I'm bad at taking tests, or I'm bad at school, or more realistically, what people tell themselves and what I've told myself, like, I'm dumb. Well, actually, I don't really tell myself that, because, I don't know, it's just a harmful narrative in my head. But eventually, someone telling themselves, I am dumb. And that identity, that reinforcing behavior, that reinforcing identity, it's tough to get over. And so, there was this kid in high school kind of slacking by, and he promises his mom one thing. There's one thing that he promises mom, and his mom really wants him to do this one thing. And this one thing is taking the SAT. Now, I'm not sure how many people, I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this, you should know, or hopefully you know what the SAT is. It's like these standardized tests. There's the SAT, then the ACT, but it's the standardized test that basically every high schooler has to take in order to get into college. Colleges, they'll look at this thing and they'll be like, okay, this will be the benchmark that we'll look at this to see how well you do against other students, and depending on your score, maybe we'll take you, maybe we won't. And this guy, he takes the test and he goes into it. Just like all the other tests, he goes into it, thinks he won't do very well, so it kind of slacks off, doesn't study at all. And then he gets a score back and he finds out he got something like a 1480 or 1490, but he's in like the 97th percentile or something crazy like that. He's in the 97th percentile of this SAT. And then he gets his test back and he's so confused. I got that score. And his mom starts confronting him. His mom gets this test and mom's like, what did you do? Why did you cheat on this test? How did you cheat? And the son, he's like, well, I didn't do anything. I honestly just took the test. I promise you I didn't cheat. And it was at that moment, or it's because of that experience, that this kid looks at that score and he's like, you know what? I'm going to start trying. I think I am the type of person who can get this kind of score. And so he starts going to classes. He starts studying for tests. And he starts acting like the type of person, and he starts taking on this type of identity of someone who gets 97th percentile on a test. Well, now we might look at the story, and honestly, I was looking at the story and I was like, okay, well, that's cool and all. There's this smart kid who thought he was dumb, but he wasn't really applying himself, and then he finds out he's smart, and then he starts trying on all this stuff. Like, boom. What's the point of the story? Well, eventually, before I get into that, this kid eventually gets into college, does super well, and then becomes this entrepreneur of some type in media. But basically, he becomes a super successful, super smart person from this experience. I'm looking at this like, okay, it's whatever. It's like, if Elon Musk never tried in any of his early exams, and then all of a sudden he started trying, he's like, this doesn't change the fact that he's basically a genius. He's basically like the super smart dude. But the story doesn't end there. Eventually, he gets his letter in the mail, and this letter in the mail is from Princeton Prep or Princeton Review, whoever does the whole SAT examinations. And so he gets this mail, and his wife tells him to open it. And so he opens up this mail, and in this mail, it says that they do this periodic review of past tests, see if maybe they missed something or maybe they got something wrong. And so they told him that they actually messed up on his exam score. They found out, or he found out in that moment, that what he actually got was like a 720, which is not near the 97th percentile. It's actually more close to like the 30th or 20th percentile. And that was his real score. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story, I think, is to see and to show how important identities are. Because it wasn't the fact that he all of a sudden got this score and then boom, he's smart again, and now he's this person who will go out and do all these cool things. But in that moment, he decided to pursue this identity, this dream identity that he had for himself. And in that moment, the dream identity he had for himself is someone who gets a 1470, 1480 on their SAT. Someone who gets in the 97th percentile on their SAT. And because of that, he starts taking all these actions, starts making these little small improvements every single day toward that dream identity of his. And because of that, that's how he ended up to where he is today. So that was a really, really powerful story that to me showed how powerful this whole idea of a dream identity really is. And so check out the story. Honestly, I'm not even sure if this is real or not. It might be a myth at this point, but I think the lesson or the moral of the story, I think it still stands, which is pursuing these dream identities that we have for ourselves, that those are powerful. And that's definitely something that I found for myself as I'm honestly over the past month or two, I really got confused over who my dream identity really is. Is it the person who I want to, yeah. Like even now as I'm talking about this, it's still confusing in my head. But after this past week or two talking about the book that I was exploring, after that and really setting my dream identity as Jesus Christ has brought a lot of direction in my life. And something else I want to talk about, moving on from the story section and onto the philosophizing section, is this thing called redirection. And I thought this was a fascinating concept that my dad was telling me about. So he is in senior living, assisted living, and it's actually, I feel like it's something a lot of us Tongans, a lot of us Polynesians, especially the females or even the males, get into, is caring for people. Because that's how we are. That's how we are as a people. We care for people. We're people. But there's this thing called redirection, and it's when you're looking after someone who has dementia or has Alzheimer's. Usually with these people, they'll be having breakfast, for example, and as they're eating breakfast, they'll start having like these distressing memories of maybe it was losing a loved one that they start thinking about, or all these different things that can pop into their head. And because of that, it starts triggering and engaging these dementia symptoms where they start freaking out, they start getting anxiety, they start getting a lot of fear. And the technique that my dad was telling me about is something called redirection, where you redirect the person's attention, the person's focus, away from that memory, away from that distressing time in their life, towards something else that will hopefully be more positive and help them basically just get through the day, but be healthier for them overall. So he was telling me about this, and a specific story he mentioned was that, well, an old dude is out there and he's eating breakfast, and all of a sudden he starts freaking out about his wife because he's in a home and he thinks his wife is still alive, and he sees that the caregiver who's trying to feed him isn't his wife. They don't start freaking out. Well, then that's where the caregiver might redirect their attention and redirect his attention away from his wife and towards something like, well, are you hungry? Well, let me give you this food. Or something like, nah, maybe it's shower time or it's TV time or whatever they want to redirect that attention toward. And the way I thought about it, or the way I heard of this whole thing to begin with, was when this idea of skiing was brought up. I don't know, I forget where I heard this, and I've never been skiing myself, but they talk about how in skiing, if you're going down a hill and you're constantly thinking to yourself, I don't want to hit the trees, I don't want to hit the trees, I don't want to hit the trees, odds are you're going to be looking at the trees the whole time, and because of that, you might hit the trees. You have a higher chance of hitting the trees. Where instead of focusing on the trees, you redirect your attention, you redirect your focus onto the space. I want to go into that open space. I want to go into that open space. And you keep telling yourself that. And so lately, I've been reminded of this because this isn't a new concept that I brought up. I brought up this concept earlier in an earlier podcast episode, but I was reminded of this especially lately because there was a specific night. I think it was literally last night where I used this tactic, this redirection habit, where basically I got home decently late and I was all alone in my room. I had every opportunity to go onto Domino's, order a pizza, and start binging. But instead of that, I redirected my focus, my attention onto a different habit. So the habit that I used to do would be sitting at my desk, opening up a video game or anime, opening up Domino's and ordering some pizza. And then from there, the whole night would take care of itself. And I would stay up till probably like 4 a.m. until I literally could not stay up anymore. And then I would take like a 4 or 5 hour nap, have to wake up the next morning and then go to work. So that was kind of the habit that I got into, especially like 2-3 weeks ago. For that whole period, that's what I was doing. But last night, instead of falling into that trap, instead of falling into that same habit over and over again, I chose to redirect that habit to something else. And so instead of focusing on this urge in my soul or this urge in my head to be like, oh, now I really want to binge eat, now I really want to binge eat, or telling myself, repeating to myself, don't order pizza, don't order pizza. Instead, I redirected my focus and my attention and the habit that I eventually did to something that I picked up. And I might have talked about this in the last podcast episode, but this thing called audio journaling, which I've been doing now. It's really not a new thing, but it's a new thing to me. Every day from now on, or every day for the past week or two, week and a half, I've been doing these audio journals where something I found with journaling that made it tough for me is that you have to sit down and you have to really focus in on this thing and really spend time on this. When audio journaling was a thing, that really opened up the opportunity for me to do other things, to multitask, where I can go for a walk, where I can clean my room, where I can do other things while audio journaling. And it's also like off the cuff like this. This podcast is like very off the cuff. So you'll notice something I'm trying to work on is I say like a lot. And that's something I'm trying to work on because that's just how off the cuff this is. If you go back to my first episode, it was literally me like going, I just said like again, and maybe I'll redirect my attention. Sometimes I don't say like, but the whole point is redirection is powerful. And and I myself, when I redirect my habit from something that is a fleeting dopamine hit to something that is a lot more fulfilling, like an audio journal, where instead of running away from my emotions through binge eating, I choose to confront my emotions through audio journaling. That is a way more fulfilling. Like, way more fulfilling. Maybe eventually I'll share that specific journal entry because I really do think it's really, really powerful. And it's probably one of the more pivotal points in my entire life, I think. So that was a super cool story that I really wanted to share. The other thing I want to share is making it out the Old Elm trenches. I was debating on whether to make this a whole podcast episode in itself. But when I first came to caddy, when I first became a golf caddy, I was stuck at a golf course called Old Elm. And Old Elm is a fascinating course because for a couple of reasons. First of all, and this might raise some eyebrows, but it's an all-male course. So no women golfers, no women caddies are allowed to be on the course. That was the first thing I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but it's whatever, I guess. The other thing is that they don't do tips. And it's kind of like this. Imagine going to a restaurant, and at that restaurant, they prohibit you from tipping. And this is a U.S. restaurant. In the U.S., it's so custom, so normal for people to tip. Like, it's basically like in their pay, waiters only get paid this certain amount. It's very, very little. But because of tipping, it allows them to get even more money and make it a livable wage, basically. That's kind of how caddying is, where the norm of caddying is that you tip your caddies. Golfers tip their caddies. But at this course, there was no tip. And there were a couple other things that just, it seemed off, where people barely got loops, or we as the new golf caddies, we were barely given opportunities to go on loops or to go caddy for these golfers so that we can eventually get paid. And then there were a couple other things like the caddy shack, or like what was the best way to, basically like our weight room for caddies, the place that we chill before we go out and go on our loop. That place was weird because it would be this living room, right? So here's where we're chilling, have some couches there. And then there's this wall in between. And then on the other side of that wall, there's a bathroom. And I'm like, okay, that seems pretty normal. You have your living space, then a wall, then a bathroom, of course. But the catch here is that the wall in between didn't go all the way up to the ceiling. It left an open airspace. So that way, whenever anyone did the number 2, we would all be smelling it. It was like that is what I call the trenches, or the Old Elm trenches, from what I say. And eventually we made it out. Like, oh, the other thing I didn't even mention is that our base pay was below everyone else's. So not only did we not get tips, we also got paid less than all the other clubs that were part of the program. Like, literally, me and my cousin, we were making $30 a loop, which doesn't sound like, it's kind of hard to quantify or doesn't have a benchmark to reference off of. But to give you a little more reference, all the other clubs were probably making around that time for new caddies like $50 a loop. And so for us to be making 30 and no tips is like kind of unheard of. And so we eventually made it out the trenches, the old trenches. We made it out. We finally got to a reasonable base pay. But this whole story, the reason I bring this up is that we made it out of those trenches. And then eventually I'm coming back and living with the same boys who are a part of the program. And I'm hearing that they're doing a lot of complaining. They're complaining that they don't really get loops. All these things that they're complaining about. When I'm in my head, I'm like, bro, you weren't there for the old trenches. You didn't know we had to get through for you to get to the place you are now. And another story this reminded me of, it's when it was super late at night, and I think we were coming back from like a party or formal or something, and it was freezing cold. So it was freezing cold. We get off the bus, and I'm over here trying to walk back. I'm like, okay, it's kind of cold. I had a suit on, so it wasn't too bad. And then there's these other dudes who literally live out here in the Midwest, and they're over here like freaking out about how freezing cold it is. And I'm over here like, I acknowledge that it's freezing cold, but I'm not like shivering over here, running to my home, and then saying out loud, oh my goodness, it's cold, it's cold. I'm like, in my head, well, not even in my, I said this out loud. I was like, why are you guys complaining? Aren't you guys from here? And then I overheard someone else who's also from Chicago, also from the Midwest. Well, yeah, but it doesn't mean we can't complain about the cold. And then this brings up another story that I was thinking about where I think in Vegas, my family, it was pretty cold for Vegas standards, which for Chicago standards is nothing at all. And so they started complaining about how cold it is out there. And I literally told them, so I was like, bro, that's nothing. Well, what are you complaining? And they said, well, just because we're from Vegas and we don't really get the cold doesn't mean we can't complain about the cold, okay? The whole moral of those three stories that I just brought up, the whole moral is this. There will always be something to complain about. And even more than that, I think a more powerful takeaway that Alex Hormozy says that this really hit home for me. There's always someone who's had it worse, but has done better. And so, of course, there's always something to complain about. And you could be, by all means, you could be completely right in whatever you're complaining about. But would you rather be right or would you rather work towards your dream? And that's something that I've really, because I would rather be, in some cases, I'd rather be wrong and working toward and pursuing my dream identity rather than being right and accepting the way things are. Because by all means, I could have been complaining about how late it was and how I'm getting home late, and then I'm stressing out about startup stuff and diet and stuff. But really, I think the more powerful thing to do in those scenarios is to be grateful. Because not only is there always something to complain about, but I think there is also always something to be grateful for. And like I mentioned about redirecting, I think redirecting away from things to complain about towards things to be grateful for is a very, very powerful. And it's something that I think hopefully will resonate with who's ever watching or listening to this, because it's really, really powerful for me in my life and the way I'm thinking. So that's the rundown of that story. Moving on, the other thing I've been thinking about is Big Dominos, and I talked about this in the last episode, but basically as I've been exploring all of this religious stuff with Christianity and Mormonism and trying to weigh things out in my brain, there's these things that I call Big Dominos, and I mentioned this in the last episode where we can place all these small little objections, small little dominoes around. Well, what about Exodus? There's not really evidence for Moses, or what about Abraham, or all these different objections that might pop into our head. But as soon as you knock down the big domino being, if Jesus Christ actually was who he said he was, then all the other objections around the Old Testament, all of those fall down. That for me, it got my mind thinking about a bunch of things. First of all, is I saw, even in my case, where when I was a kid, I grew up basically on the notion that only Joseph Smith was a prophet, or only Mormonism is true. And because of that, I didn't have big dominoes around God existing, or something like Jesus Christ was actually who he said he was. So as soon as that big domino of Mormonism kind of fell apart for me, that's when I jumped all the way straight back to atheism. And the reason I did that was because I haven't set a big domino yet for something like God exists. And that's something that I have now, where it's not necessarily saying that I have a big domino set where, okay, I know for sure God exists. What I am saying is that now I know about the arguments that are both supporting God and against God. And in my brain, in my head, they kind of even out to some extent. They kind of have like a 50-50 shot. And so that in my head is like a big domino where you could have all these objections around like problem of evil. Why does God allow bad things? Or why does he keep himself hidden from the world? If he wants me to know about him, then he should just make himself known to everyone. Or we can have all these different objections, but it's the the pragmatic side or the practical argument in my head that knocks the domino over. And then it's the reason why I'm rational in knocking the domino over and being like, okay, now I'm willing to take the step into believing God exists and reading scriptures and saying prayers that will hopefully allow me to eventually come to a relationship with Him, with God, with Christ. And honestly, like, I'm still trying to think through these ideas, but it's something that I feel like resonated with me a lot. Because depending on the big dominoes that we set in our lives, that could be the foundations of our entire belief system. And so I think putting our big dominoes, or our key bets, on things that are really, really important to us and that we can realistically try to explore is powerful. And I feel like I'm going on a tangent here, so I'm going to change subjects because I'm still trying to think through this. So as you can tell, very off the cuff with this whole podcast. Moving on to the next section after the philosophizing is L's of the week. I think the biggest L of this week was probably from yesterday. And I was talking about how yesterday I came back home and I was in my, basically like a prime night for some binging. I was stressed out over a whole bunch of things, so kind of was wanting to run away from my emotions. And what better way to do that than just munching on some pizza? So the reason I think was a part of that fed into it being such a tough day from yesterday was because throughout the day I was spending time with family. And my dad was in town, and so I was spending time with him. My sister, she's still in town, spending time with her. And so as we're in the car, we're driving to all these different places that we want to check out. Oh, we'll check out this place and then maybe grab some food over there. And as we're driving, I got very distracted. I wasn't present in the moment, and I downloaded this game called Super Auto Pets. It's a game that I played like for the past 2-3 weeks. It's the game that kept me up till like 4 in the morning. And so I played this game and I was so out of it. I was so not present in the moment with my family, which is something that like I try to be better because I say all the time, I'm all about family. Like family is now it's beginning to be like my number 3 priority in life, but it's still above work. It's still above all these other things. So I should be placing priority on that. And so for me to literally be in the same car as my family and I'm not present with them, like even saying that out loud right now, that's something that I really want to work. And so that is probably a big L this week, and turning that L into a lesson and turning that lesson into the small steps that I can make, small improvements going forward, then that's what it's all about. Moving on to the weekly roundup. Today, I didn't really find anything that I really want to talk about. If there was something, there's something from Atomic Habits that, I mean, just a phenomenal book. But in this book, he says this quote: "The implicit assumption behind any goal is this: once I reach my goal, then I'll be happy." And it reminded me how happiness is a skill. And in some ways, happiness is a choice. Where realistically, it's a choice about what we focus on. Because, like I mentioned, there's always something to complain about. But again, there's always something to be grateful for. And I think, we can control, or one of the very few things that we actually can control is our focus and our effort. And so when we focus on something like this, away from complaining about something, and towards being grateful for something. In that way, in my mind, it seems like happiness begins to look more like a choice instead of like a badge of honor. Like after you have to be this tall to get happiness. But instead it becomes, what do you want to focus on? And that might be the question for today. And I'll make that the question for this week. It'll be, what are you focusing on today? If you had to pick one thing that you wanted to focus on, what is it? For me today, it'll be things that I'm grateful for. And honestly, something else that I've been thinking about is like, one really good way to measure realistically how grateful you are for something, or for someone, specifically someone, is to see whether or not that person feels that you're grateful for it, whether or not they know you're grateful for it. And so the reason I bring this up is because I want to text some people. And I texted some people yesterday, but text some people today and just let them know that I'm grateful. So that's my invite for this podcast episode. Text some people who have helped you through your life, whether that be your mom, whether that be a friend, or whoever. Just text them that you're grateful for them. That'll be I guess maybe that can be like another thing that I add to this podcast. It'll be like an invitation or something. But moving on to the next episode, or the next section of this podcast, is the life update. Let's see. Biggest things with the life update is, where do I start? Let's start with my God, because I've kind of shifted my priorities now, where now I'm placing my God as number one. Every day for the past week, I've been reading my scriptures and saying prayers. And my prayers have been, it's kind of funny because it's not necessarily like, oh God, I know you're there. I know you love me. It's like conditional prayers. It's because I've taken like this more agnostic approach where I'm kind of like shouting into the abyss, and in the darkness, it kind of looks like someone might be there, but also someone might not be there, so I'm not really sure. But I still feel that it's rational for me to say like, well, if you are there, then listen up. Or if you are there, then can I talk to you? And that's kind of how these prayers are going, where I'm like, God, if you're listening to me right now, then I just want you to know that I'm grateful for everything. And setting my priorities in this way where my God becomes number one, and then after that is myself. And then after that is my people, and then my work. I don't know. I'm test running it now because who knows? Maybe 20 years down the line, I become like a hard atheist and I'm like arguing against God. And I look back at this podcast and like, what was I thinking? Or maybe 20 years down the line, I'm like a super hard philosopher and theologian and defending the Christian faith. Who knows? Maybe like a completely different faith altogether, but this is just where I found myself right now on this journey. Let's see. Moving on to the update on myself. I think, like I've been mentioning, been very, or at least a lot healthier today, right now, than I've been in the past 2 weeks, especially because I've been trying to replace this binge eating habit with something that is a lot healthier. So that's like that's a dub for real. Update with my people. This is another cool thing. So it's something I want to work on because, like I mentioned, my family came in this past weekend and I wasn't as present with them as I would like to. And so that's something that I want to work on. But more specifically, I think working on myself, which would be being able to confront my emotions more directly, more head on. And what I mean by that is being able to confront my emotions in a healthier way, to find fulfilling dopamine hits rather than fleet, which honestly, today is audio journaling, which I'd highly recommend, by the way. It is like so convenient for me to go on a walk and not care about the audio quality. Because for these types of podcast episodes, like I'm sitting down right now and I'm talking about these things, and it's something that I put effort into. I want to make sure that the audio quality isn't completely terrible. And so I'm sitting down and I'm talking to this with the MacBook microphone. But with those audio journals, number one is I don't have to care about the quality because I don't really necessarily care about listening back to these over again. But if I eventually do, or if I eventually want to, then I can. On top of that, it allows me to multitask, so I can like do all these other things while doing these audio journals. And it's super off the cuff, so they can just be like whatever's on my mind. But the other thing that I think is super powerful is I can be a lot more vulnerable. Like I'm already, I think, in my opinion, generally pretty vulnerable when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to this podcast. But on those audio journals, man, that's where I'm like way more vulnerable. And being able to be vulnerable and have this like 100% honesty about what I'm going through. Because on this podcast, like I don't share everything. I try to share the biggest lessons. I try to be vulnerable in some cases, but I'm not sharing with you literally everything that's going on in my life. And which honestly is probably a healthier thing to do. Maybe eventually down the road I will, but on those audio journals, I literally share everything. And because I know that it's not public for the world to see, and so I can share literally anything that's on my mind. And so this audio journaling thing, I mean, it's very, very helpful. It doesn't have to be audios, but journaling in general is probably a very healthy way to confront emotions. And it's the healthiest way that I found to help me work through my emotions. So that's a dub, would highly recommend. And that is my weekly intention. So from now on, hopefully I'll remember to keep on top of this, but from now on, I'm going to try to set a weekly intention at the end of these episodes and then give an update on how that went next episode. So for this episode, my weekly intention for the next one coming up is that I will turn to audio journaling, which is this form of fulfilling dopamine, rather than binge eating, which is this form of fleeting dopamine. So that's the weekly intention. Wish me luck. Oh, man, I forgot to give an update on my work. I felt like I've been talking for ages. Update on my work. Let's see here. The biggest thing is probably demo day. So now I'm creating this pitch deck for demo day. And the pitch deck is like, it's supposed to be 5 minutes. And I'm not sure how to fit all the stories that I want to tell in those 5 minutes because it's difficult for us to remember numbers and graphs and bullet points. But stories are really hit home. Those are really things that tug at the heartstrings that will get people to. And so I really want to focus in on the story. And this past, I think 2 days ago, maybe it was actually, I think this was yesterday. I met with Mike and Brylan, the guys who run the garage over here, and meeting over what story do I want to tell in this pitch deck. And so we'll eventually see what the pitch deck turns out into. I think you'll see by the end of August. So I think tomorrow August begins. So by the end of August, you'll be able to see the entire pitch deck, the entire demo day. We'll see how it goes. Honestly, coming into it, I wasn't very confident about what I would do because, like, realistically, this isn't a venture backable business. We Are Nation is not venture backable. Because of that, I kind of get hesitant on whether should I pitch, should I not. What they were talking about is I should lean into that more, and I should use that as like, this connects back to something that I talked about in the last episode, where realistically, I'm not really in this for the money. Like, the money, that would be great and all, but with We Are Nation, I'm not in it solely for the money. And the reason I think I should win, or the reason I think I want to win, is because of it. And not even though. It's not even though I am not in it for the money that means I should win. It's because I'm not in it for the money that I think I should win. Something along those lines, that framework that I want to present in this pitch. So I've just kind of been thinking through, workshopping what this thing might look like. In terms of the actual work, just finished posting Coach V's new website and asking him if he knows any other Pacific Islander businesses that want to hop on this. I think he will be like the case study to mention with this thing that we're building. So I'll talk with him, hopefully get more people on board with this idea, more Pacific Islander businesses. And then the other thing is this whole Nesian BA idea, which is honestly, like, the whole idea is to give these Pacific Islander students who come out of college, give them real world experience, because the degree is nice and all, but without the real world experience, these companies won't hire you. And this Nesian VA idea is to connect them with startups to hopefully, or not even necessarily startups, but businesses who need dev work done. So it gives them this project that they can point to, that they can put on their resume, their portfolio, but also gives businesses some type of value that they can tangibly look at and point toward. So that's the other idea, and I've been having a whole bunch of random meetings around that. But we'll see how things go, honestly. This whole idea is starting to, I don't know, it's starting to finally come together in some type of way that kind of makes coherent sense, where I started something because I was lonely as this only Pacific Islander, what I felt like was the only Polynesian at Northwestern. So I started meeting cool people. And then I was like, hold up, why don't more people know about them? And then I started interviewing them, getting their stories out there. And then I started this community for Pacific Islander entrepreneurs or founders. And then after that, I was like, well, how can I provide them value? And it was difficult to provide them value in the form of a community. But now I'm trying to provide value in the way of helping them automate, helping them save time with their businesses while still growing them. And ultimately, without losing sight of what matters most, of the entire reason they got into business in the first place, which is to spend time with their families. So that's what I've been thinking about, and hopefully will help these businesses do. One thing I will say is that I haven't been the best leader. And the reason I say that is because I've got another guy on board, and maybe he's listening to this, but I've got another guy on board with this project, and I haven't been giving him enough direction or selling him enough on this idea. And as leaders, that's what you have to do, or that's what you do, is you sell your employees, you sell your followers, you sell your team on the idea, on the direction that you want to work towards. And hopefully they buy into that idea, and then they'll start working more and more with it. So yeah, we'll see how things go there, and keep everyone posted with the progress. And then next week, I'll try to give the update on the weekly intentions that I set this week, which would be turning to audio. But yeah, I'll see you in the next episode. I record these episodes completely free to share success with everyone. So the only thing I ask is that if you learned anything or found something interesting in this episode, just leave a review and share it with a friend. Only takes 5 seconds and it would mean the world. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next episode. Tatok, see you.